In the hushed classroom of Wentworth Secondary College, all eyes were fixed on a blackboard filled with symbols and numbers that seemed impossible to decipher. Professor Eleanor Harrington, with a challenging smile and sharp tone, declared, "Liam Mitchell, if you solve this equation, my annual salary will be yours." What began as a taunt transformed into a moment no one in that room could have predicted. Within minutes, a secret kept for years would come to light, changing lives forever. This is a story about perseverance, courage, and the power of believing in yourself, even when everyone else doubts you. Prepare yourself, because what's about to unfold will touch your heart. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of room 37 at Wentworth Secondary College, one of Melbourne's most respected public schools. The mathematics classroom was unusually quiet, the typical teenage chatter silenced by the tension hanging in the air. 24 pairs of eyes darted between the impossible-looking equation on the board and the slender figure of 12-year-old Liam Mitchell, who sat motionless at his desk. Professor Eleanor Harrington stood with arms crossed, her posture rigid, and her silver-rimmed glasses perched precariously on her nose. Her reputation as the school's most demanding teacher was well-earned, but today, something in her demeanor had shifted from strict to openly antagonistic. "Well, Mr. Mitchell," she said, tapping her foot impatiently, "I've presented you with a challenge that most university students would struggle with. Since you seem to think my lessons are beneath your attention, perhaps this will engage you." Her lips curled into what might generously be called a smile. "If you can solve this equation correctly, my annual salary will be yours. That's about $90,000. Not bad for a 12-year-old, is it?" Nervous laughter rippled through the classroom. Liam's best mate, Charlie Wong, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Amelia Patel, the class's top student, bit her lip anxiously. Liam looked at the equation, a complex differential with multiple variables that seemed deliberately designed to confuse. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his face remained calm. For months he'd been keeping his head down, trying to blend in, trying to be normal. But normal kids didn't see mathematical patterns. Everywhere they looked, normal kids couldn't solve university-level problems in their heads. Without a word, he stood up. The scrape of his chair against the linoleum floor seemed deafening in the silent room. As he walked to the board, he could feel 25 sets of eyes following his every move, 24 classmates and one teacher who clearly expected him to fail. He picked up the chalk, its weight familiar in his hand, despite his efforts to avoid participating in class. As he raised it to the board, a girl in the back row, Sophie Jenkins, pulled out her phone and began to record, sensing something momentous was about to happen. "The clock is ticking, Mr. Mitchell," Professor Harrington said, glancing pointedly at her watch. "You have 15 minutes. Liam took a deep breath and began to write. The story of how they had all arrived at this moment began 6 months earlier, on a bright January morning, the first day of the school year in Australia's Southern Hemisphere calendar. Liam had stood at the entrance of Wentworth Secondary College, a new backpack slung over his shoulder and uncertainty clouding his blue eyes. "You'll be fine," his mother, Dr. Victoria Mitchell, had assured him, adjusting his uniform tie. A respected quantum physicist at the University of Melbourne, she understood better than most the burden of exceptional intelligence. "Remember what we talked about. Just be yourself, but don't show off," Liam had finished for her, having heard the advice countless times. "I know, Mum." His father, Robert Mitchell, a structural engineer for Australia's space agency, had squeezed his shoulder. "Your brain is a gift, son, but it doesn't define you. There's more to life than equations." Liam had nodded, watching as other students streamed past him into the schoolyard, laughing and calling out to friends after the summer holiday. None of them carried the weight of being the child of two brilliant minds, or the pressure of an IQ that had tested off the charts when he was just 6 years old. His parents had made the decision to move from Sydney to Melbourne for a fresh start. At his previous school, word had gotten out about Liam's exceptional abilities after he'd absent-mindedly corrected his Year 5 teacher's calculations. The resulting attention had turned him into something between a curiosity and a target. This time, his parents had agreed they would keep his abilities quiet. Let him have a normal childhood, make friends based on who he was, not what he could do. That resolution had lasted exactly 3 weeks, until Professor Harrington had handed back their first maths assessment. Liam had deliberately included 2 minor errors to avoid a perfect score, but the sharp-eyed teacher had noticed something odd in his work. "Mr. Mitchell," she'd said, holding his paper aloft, "you've arrived at the correct answer through an unconventional method, and then apparently introduced errors into your final calculations. Would you care to explain why?" The classroom had gone quiet. Liam had mumbled something about making mistakes, but Professor Harrington's eyes had narrowed suspiciously. From that moment, she seemed determined to catch him out, to prove he was either cheating or showing disrespect by not taking her class seriously. Now, as chalk dust floated in the afternoon sunlight, Liam worked methodically through the problem. His hand moved with confidence, breaking down the complex equation into manageable parts. The classroom remained silent, except for the soft scratching of chalk against board and the occasional surprised intake of breath as his classmates watched the solution unfold. Professor Harrington's smile had faded, replaced by a deepening frown. She'd expected confusion, perhaps even tears, not this calm dismantling of a problem she'd specifically chosen because it required knowledge well beyond the Year 7 curriculum. 10 minutes in, Charlie whispered to Amelia, "He's actually doing." Professor Harrington shot them a warning glance but said nothing. Her attention was fixed on Liam's work, checking each step for errors she was increasingly certain she wouldn't find. As Liam approached the final steps of the solution, the classroom door opened. Principal Diana Simmons stood in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Professor Harrington, may I have a word?" She gestured toward the hallway, then noticed the unusual scene before her. A 12-year-old boy confidently working through an equation that even she, with her mathematics background, recognized as far beyond the standard curriculum. "What's going on here?" she asked, stepping into the room. Before Professor Harrington could answer, Liam wrote the final number with a flourish and set down the chalk. He turned to face the room, his expression neither triumphant nor boastful, merely relieved. "I believe that's correct," he said quietly. The silence that followed was broken by Sophie's voice from the back row. "I've got it all on video, Liam. Every second." Principal Simmons looked from the board to Professor Harrington, whose face had gone pale. "Eleanor, I think you'd better explain what's happening." Here, as the bell rang signaling the end of class, no one moved. They all sensed they were witnessing something significant, a turning point, not just for Liam, but for all of them. Whatever happened next would change everything. 3 months earlier, on a mild autumn day in April, Liam Mitchell had been sitting alone at lunch, a dog-eared copy of A Brief History of Time concealed behind his school planner. Reading Hawking at 12 wasn't something he wanted to explain to his new classmates. He'd been carefully maintaining his cover as an average student, deliberately scoring in the middle range on tests and participating minimally in class discussions. "Mind if I join you?" Liam quickly closed his book as Amelia Patel slid onto the bench across from him, her lunch tray loaded with the day's offering of shepherd's pie. With her perfect academic record and confident demeanor, Amelia was everything Liam was trying not to be. Visibly intelligent, recognized, set apart. "Sure," he mumbled, pushing his own half-eaten lunch around his plate. Amelia studied him with curious brown eyes. "You're not what you're pretending to be, are you?" Liam nearly choked on his water. "What do you mean?" "I saw you correct your test before handing it in yesterday. You changed right answers to wrong ones." She tilted her head. "Why would anyone do that?" Before Liam could formulate a response, Charlie Wong dropped into the seat beside him, his lunch tray clattering. "What are we talking about?" Charlie asked, immediately digging into his food. With his easygoing nature and quick wit, Charlie had been the first person to befriend Liam at Wentworth. "Nothing," Liam said quickly. "The fact that your mate here is secretly a genius," Amelia replied, ignoring Liam's warning look. Charlie paused mid-bite. "What, Liam?" "Nah, he's rubbish at maths. No offense, mate," he added with a grin. "He's not rubbish, he's brilliant and hiding it," Amelia insisted, "and I want to know why." The question hung between them as the cafeteria bustled around them. Liam considered his options. He could deny it, but Amelia seemed too perceptive to fool. He could brush it off as a joke, but that might only make her more curious. Or he could tell the truth, something he hadn't done since arriving at Wentworth. "I just want to be normal," he finally said, his voice barely audible above the cafeteria noise. "At my old school in Sydney, once people found out about—" He gestured vaguely at his head. Everything changed. I wasn't Liam anymore. I was the brain or the genius freak." Charlie's eyebrows shot up. Wait, are you serious? You're actually smart. Smarter than smart, Amelia said. I'm guessing you could teach half our classes, couldn't you? Liam shrugged uncomfortably. My parents are both scientists. I grew up around this stuff. That doesn't explain natural aptitude, Amelia countered, or why Professor Harrington seems to have it in for you. Charlie snorted. Harrington has it in for everyone. She's a nightmare. No, Amelia shook her head. With Liam, it's different. It's like she senses something off about him and can't figure out what. Liam stared at his lunch. Trey, she caught me using an advanced method to solve a problem. I think she suspects I'm not being honest about what I know. And she's right, Amelia said, not unkindly. But I still don't understand why you're hiding. Being smart is cool, Charlie laughed. Said no teenager ever. It's not about being cool, Liam explained. It's about being treated like a person. When people find out, they either expect too much or they resent you. My parents thought it would be better if I could just have a normal school experience this time. The conversation was interrupted by a shadow falling across their table. Professor Harrington stood there, arms folded across her chest. Mr. Mitchell, she said, her voice carrying enough for nearby tables to quiet down and listen. I've been reviewing your recent work and I find myself puzzled. Liam felt his stomach clench. Puzzled, Professor? Yes. Your test results are consistently average, and yet your approach to problems shows flashes of understanding well beyond your years. Her eyes narrowed. It's almost as if you're deliberately underperforming. The cafeteria had grown notably quieter, students at nearby tables listening intently. I'm just doing my best, Professor, Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady. Professor Harrington's lips thinned into a tight line. I wonder, in 20 years of teaching, I've encountered all types of students, Mr. Mitchell. Those who struggle, those who excel, and those who, for whatever reason, choose to hide their light under a bushel. She leaned closer. I don't appreciate deception in my classroom. As she walked away, the buzz of conversation resumed, but with a new focus. Liam could feel curious glances directed his way. Well, Charlie said, that wasn't subtle. She's going to expose you, Amelia warned. She won't rest until she proves she's right about you. Liam pushed his tray away, appetite gone. Why does she care? Shouldn't she be happy I'm not causing trouble? Teachers like Harrington have a very specific idea of how things should be, Amelia explained. Students who don't fit her categories make her uncomfortable. She paused, considering. My sister had her 3 years ago. She says Harrington was passed over for a position at Melbourne University because they wanted someone with more innovative teaching methods. So she's bitter, Charlie concluded, and determined to prove her traditional methods are best, Amelia added. A student hiding exceptional abilities challenges her whole approach. The weeks that followed proved Amelia right. Professor Harrington's attention to Liam intensified, with pointed questions during class and extra scrutiny of his work. Each time he deliberately performed at an average level, her frustration seemed to grow. By mid-June, with winter settling over Melbourne, the situation had reached a breaking point. Liam had developed a persistent stomachache that his mother suspected was stress-related. Charlie and Amelia had become protective, running interference when they could. But Professor Harrington's determination only increased. The turning point came during a parent-teacher night. Victoria and Robert Mitchell sat across from Professor Harrington, listening with increasing concern as she detailed her suspicions. With all due respect, Professor, Dr. Mitchell said carefully, are you suggesting our son is somehow disrupting your class by not performing to his full potential? I'm suggesting, Dr. Mitchell, that your son is being deliberately dishonest, Professor Harrington replied, stiffly. And I wonder if perhaps you're encouraging this behavior. Robert Mitchell's expression darkened. That's quite an accusation. Is it? I've researched your backgrounds. 2 brilliant scientists, 1 child. It's not uncommon for parents like yourselves to have certain expectations. Our only expectation, Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled anger, is that our son be allowed to learn in a supportive environment. The meeting ended shortly after, with nothing resolved. That night, Liam overheard his parents discussing whether they should move him to a different school. We can't keep uprooting him, his father argued. He needs stability, friends. He needs teachers who see him as a child, not a problem to solve, his mother countered. Liam sat on the stairs, listening, a familiar heaviness settling in his chest. Why couldn't he just be normal? Why did his brain have to work the way it did, setting him apart when all he wanted was to belong? The next day, Professor Harrington was unusually quiet during class. Liam dared to hope she might have decided to let the matter drop. That hope was shattered when 5 minutes before the bell, she wrote a complex differential equation on the board and turned to face the class. "Before we end for the day," she announced, "I'd like to try something different." Her gaze fixed on Liam. "Mr. Mitchell, would you please come to the board?" And so began the moment that would change everything. The challenge, the equation, the promise of a salary, and the secret that couldn't stay hidden any longer. Principal Diana Simmons stood before the equation with her arms crossed, her expression moving from confusion to understanding as she studied Liam's work. 20 years as an educator, with a background in mathematics herself, had given her a keen eye for exceptional talent. What she saw on the blackboard was nothing short of remarkable. "Eleanor," she said, turning to Professor Harrington, "this is university-level work." Professor Harrington's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, well, that was rather the point." The classroom remained in stunned silence. Liam stood awkwardly by the board, chalk dust coating his fingers. The weight of 24 stares pressed upon him, but it was Sophie's phone still recording that worried him most. His secret was now documented, impossible to take back. "Perhaps," Principal Simmons suggested, her voice measured but firm, "we should continue this discussion in my office. Eleanor, Liam, if you would join me." She turned to address the class. "The rest of you are dismissed. Sophie, I'll need to see that recording, please." As Liam followed the adults from the room, Charlie caught his eye and gave him a small thumbs up. Amelia nodded encouragingly. "There. Support those silent," steadied him as he stepped into the corridor. Principal Simmons paused. "Liam, should we call your parents?" He nodded, relieved at the suggestion. "Yes, please." The walk to the administrative wing felt endless. Students changing classes stared as they passed, word already spreading through the school's unofficial network. By lunch, everyone would know about the equation, the challenge, and how Liam Mitchell from Year 7 had called Professor Harrington's bluff. In the principal's office, Liam sat rigidly in a leather chair, hands folded in his lap. Professor Harrington took the seat furthest from him, her posture defensive. Principal Simmons picked up her phone. "Dr. Mitchell, this is Principal Simmons from Wentworth Secondary. Yes, Liam is fine physically, but we have a situation that requires your attention. Could you and your husband come in immediately?" "Thank you." While they waited, Principal Simmons reviewed the video Sophie had reluctantly surrendered. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she watched. "Eleanor," she said finally, setting the phone down, "would you care to explain why you challenged a 12-year-old student to solve a university-level equation with a $90,000 wager?" Professor Harrington's face flushed. It wasn't a serious wager. It was merely a dramatic way to make a point. "And what point was that?" "That Mr. Mitchell has been deliberately underperforming in my class, that he's been dishonest about his abilities." Principal Simmons turned to Liam. "Is this true?" Liam swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to be dishonest. I just wanted to fit in." "He's been manipulating test scores," Professor Harrington interjected, "deliberately introducing errors to appear average." "I see." Principal Simmons leaned back in her chair, "And rather than discussing this concern with his parents or with me, you decided to publicly challenge him?" Before Professor Harrington could respond, there was a knock at the door. Victoria and Robert Mitchell entered, concern etched on their faces. Dr. Victoria Mitchell immediately went to her son, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "What's happened?" she asked, looking between the adults. Principal Simmons gestured to the chairs beside Liam. "Please sit down. We've had a rather unusual incident in Professor Harrington's maths class today." She played the video. As it ended, Robert Mitchell rubbed his forehead wearily. "We've been through this before." "You knew?" Professor Harrington demanded. "You knew he was capable of this level of mathematics, and you encouraged him to hide it." "We encouraged him," Victoria said firmly, "to have a normal childhood, to make friends his own age, to develop socially as well as intellectually. But he's wasting his potential." "He's 12, Robert countered. "He has his whole life to be exceptional. Right now he needs to be a child." Principal Simmons held up a hand to forestall further argument. "I think we need to take a step back. Liam, would you like to tell us your perspective?" All eyes turned to him. Liam felt the familiar tightness in his chest, The pressure of expectations, the fear of standing out, the exhaustion of pretending to be less than he was. "I just wanted to be normal," he said quietly. "At my old school, once everyone found out about my abilities, everything changed. Teachers treated me differently. Kids either wanted me to do their homework or they called me a freak." He looked down at his hands. "We moved here so I could start fresh. Mum and Dad thought it would be better if no one knew." Professor Harrington scoffed. "So you decided to waste everyone's time to mock the educational system?" "No," Liam protested. "I still did all the work. I just adjusted my answers." "Which is academically dishonest." Victoria Mitchell straightened in her chair. "My son was trying to protect himself from exactly the kind of situation you created today, Professor. You publicly humiliated him to prove a point." "I exposed the truth," Professor Harrington insisted. "At what cost?" Robert asked. "You've now ensured that every student in this school will see him as different, exceptional, other." Principal Simmons, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "I believe there are legitimate concerns on both sides here. Professor Harrington's approach was inappropriate, but Liam's deliberate underperformance isn't sustainable either." She turned to Liam. "Education is about helping students reach their potential, not hiding it." "But what if reaching my potential means losing everything else?" Liam asked, his voice breaking slightly. "What if being smart means never having friends or just being normal?" The room fell silent. It was the fundamental question that had haunted Liam since his abilities had first become apparent, the impossible choice between intellectual honesty and social acceptance. Principal Simmons's expression softened. "I think perhaps we've all failed you, Liam. Education shouldn't force that choice on anyone." Victoria squeezed her son's hand. "That's why we made the decisions we did. But perhaps we were wrong too." "I have a suggestion," Principal Simmons said after a moment's reflection. "What if, instead of hiding Liam's abilities or pushing him to skip years ahead, we create a personalized learning plan, one that challenges him intellectually while keeping him with his peer group?" Robert looked interested. "What would that look like?" "Extension work, independent projects, perhaps some online university, courses for credit, while he maintains his regular classes for social development." She smiled at Liam. "The goal would be balance, not forcing you to choose." For the first time since entering the office, Liam felt a flicker of hope. Could that work? Professor Harrington cleared her throat. "If I may." Everyone turned, expressions wary. "I admit my approach today was overzealous, but I've seen too many gifted students lose their potential because no one challenged them appropriately." Her voice softened slightly. "I wouldn't want that for Liam, despite our differences." Principal Simmons nodded. "Then perhaps you could be part of the solution, Eleanor. Help us design a program that nurtures exceptional students without isolating them." As the adults began discussing possibilities, Liam's thoughts drifted to Charlie and Amelia waiting outside, to Sophie's video that would undoubtedly circulate despite confiscation, to the classroom of peers who had witnessed his moment of truth. Everything had changed today. The question was whether it had changed for better or worse. By the following morning, Liam's equation had become the stuff of Wentworth legend. As he walked through the school gates, conversations hushed, heads turned, and whispers followed in his wake. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. This was exactly what he'd feared, becoming a spectacle rather than a person. "Oi, Mitchell!" Liam turned to see Charlie jogging toward him, backpack bouncing against his shoulder blades. Despite everything, the sight of his friend's familiar grin eased some of the tension in Liam's chest. "You're a bloody YouTube sensation, mate," Charlie announced, falling into step beside him. "Sophie's video got taken down officially, but not before half the school downloaded it. Year 10s are asking for your autograph." Liam groaned. "Perfect." "Could be worse," Charlie shrugged. "At least they're impressed, not calling you a freak." "Give it time," Liam muttered. They made their way toward the main building, weaving through clusters of students who parted like the Red Sea as they approached. Near the entrance, Amelia waited, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "How was the Inquisition yesterday?" she asked as they reached her. "Intense," Liam admitted, "but actually better than I expected. Principal Simmons is talking about some kind of personalized learning plan. So you don't have to pretend anymore?" Charlie asked. "I guess not." "And Harrington's salary?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Is she really going to pay up?" Liam shook his head. No one's taking that seriously. She said it wasn't a real wager. Convenient, Charlie snorted. Still, I'd have loved to see you collect. The warning bell rang and students began streaming toward classrooms. Liam hesitated at the entrance to the mathematics corridor. You'll be fine, Amelia assured him, reading his reluctance. Whatever happens, we've got your back. Her confidence steadied him as they entered Professor Harrington's classroom. The room fell silent as Liam took his seat, all eyes following his movement. Professor Harrington stood at her desk, sorting through papers, with deliberate focus, not acknowledging the charged atmosphere. When the final bell rang, she looked up, surveying the class with a neutral expression. Before we begin today's lesson, she said, her voice carrying in the quiet room, I would like to address yesterday's incident. She cleared her throat. My approach was inappropriate, and for that I apologize to Mr. Mitchell and to all of you who witnessed it. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the classroom. Professor Eleanor Harrington was known for many things, but apologies were not among them. However, she continued, the incident has highlighted a broader issue that affects our entire educational community. How do we appropriately challenge students with different abilities and learning needs? How do we create an environment where excellence is encouraged without creating unhealthy pressure or isolation? Liam sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. This was not the public humiliation he had expected. To that end, Professor Harrington said, Principal Simmons has asked me to help develop an enrichment program for students who need additional challenges. Participation will be voluntary, and the goal will be to nurture talent while maintaining normal social development. Her gaze found Liam. Mr. Mitchell, I believe I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition of the impossible position you were in, trying to balance your intellectual needs with your social ones. No student should have to make that choice. The classroom remained silent, students exchanging puzzled glances. This was not the Professor Harrington they knew. Now, she said briskly, turning to the board, today we're discussing quadratic equations. I expect full attention from everyone. As the lesson progressed, Liam felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time since arriving at Wentworth, he answered questions without carefully calculating whether his response would draw too much attention. When Professor Harrington posed a particularly challenging problem, he raised his hand without hesitation. After class, Principal Simmons was waiting in the corridor. Beside her stood a tall man with a neat beard and wire-rimmed glasses. Liam, she called, could I speak with you for a moment? He approached cautiously, aware of curious glances from passing students. This is Professor James Chen. From the University of Melbourne, Principal Simmons explained. He's agreed to help us develop the enrichment program we discussed yesterday. Professor Chen extended his hand. Dr. Mitchell, your mother, was a colleague of mine years ago. When Diana called about a mathematically gifted student who needed a customized program, I had no idea it would be Victoria's son. He smiled warmly. Though, perhaps I should have guessed. Talent often runs in families. Professor Chen will be visiting once a week to work with students in the new program, Principal Simmons explained. We're calling it the Wentworth Scholars Initiative. Students from all year levels who need additional challenges will have the opportunity to work on advanced projects while maintaining their regular class schedules. And I won't be singled out? Liam asked hesitantly. You'll be one of several students with various talents, Professor Chen assured him. The goal is challenge, not isolation. As they discussed the details, Liam noticed Charlie and Amelia hovering nearby, clearly curious. He gestured for them to join the conversation. My friends, he explained to the adults, they've been helping me cope. Principal Simmons nodded approvingly. Perhaps they'd like to be involved as well. The program isn't just for those with mathematical gifts. We're looking for students with all types of exceptional abilities. Charlie looked startled. Me? I'm as average as they come. You're the best artist in our year, Liam pointed out. Remember that mural you designed for the library? And Charlie has a photographic memory for historical dates, Amelia added. He just hides it because he thinks it's uncool to know things. Charlie reddened. Traitors, both of you. Professor Chen laughed. It seems Liam isn't the only one concealing talents at Wentworth. As the conversation continued, Liam felt something unfamiliar and wonderful. The possibility of a world where he could be both. Exceptional and accepted, where his abilities could be acknowledged without defining him completely. It was just a beginning, just a possibility, but for the first time in years, it felt like enough. 2 weeks after the equation incident, Wentworth Secondary College buzzed with anticipation. The inaugural meeting of the Wentworth Scholars Initiative was scheduled for that afternoon, and rumors about its exclusive nature had spread throughout the school. Principal Simmons had been clear. Participation would be by invitation only, based on teacher recommendations and demonstrated exceptional ability in any field. Liam sat in the school cafeteria with Charlie and Amelia, picking at his lunch while students at nearby tables stole glances in their direction. 15 invitations, Amelia said, unfolding her own letter for the 10th time that day. Out of the entire school, only 15 students. Charlie poked at his shepherd's pie. Still can't believe I got one. I'm not exactly scholar material. Your historical memory is phenomenal, Liam reminded him, and Professor Chen specifically mentioned your visual spatial intelligence. Yeah, but that's just doodling. It's not like solving university-level maths. Amelia rolled her eyes. There are different types of intelligence, Charlie. That's the whole point of this initiative. Liam smiled, watching his friends debate. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, assessments, and planning sessions. To his surprise, Professor Harrington had thrown herself into developing the new program with unexpected enthusiasm. It was as if their confrontation had awakened something in her, a reminder of why she'd become a teacher in the first place. Have either of you heard who else got invitations? Liam asked, lowering his voice. Amelia nodded. Sophie Jenkins, obviously. Her filming skills are impressive, and apparently she's been coding her own app since year 5. Zach Thompson from year 10 for science, Charlie added. And that quiet girl from music, Maya Patel, no relation to you. He nodded at Amelia. Plays like 5 instruments or something. The conversation paused as a shadow fell across their table. They looked up to find Professor Harrington standing there, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Afternoon, she said, her tone businesslike but lacking its usual edge. I trust you'll all be attending the meeting today. The 3 nodded in unison. Good, Mr. Mitchell. Principal Simmons asked if you might arrive 15 minutes early. Professor Chen would like to discuss something with you. Liam felt a flicker of anxiety. Is everything all right? Perfectly, Professor Harrington assured him. It's an opportunity, not a concern. She hesitated, then added, Your parents will be there as well. After she'd walked away, Charlie let out a low whistle. Special meeting before the special meeting. You're like the VIP of VIPs, mate. Or I'm in trouble again, Liam muttered. Doubtful, Amelia said thoughtfully. More likely, they want your input on the program structure. You're the catalyst for all this, after all. At precisely 3:15, Liam knocked on the door of the conference room where the Scholars Initiative would meet. Inside, he found a scene that immediately put him at ease. His parents were chatting animatedly with Professor Chen, while Principal Simmons and Professor Harrington arranged folders on a large oval table. Ah, Liam, Professor Chen greeted him warmly. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the framework for our advanced mathematics. Component. Victoria Mitchell hugged her son, whispering, Proud of you, before stepping back to let Robert ruffle Liam's hair affectionately. We've been reviewing your previous work, Professor Chen explained, gesturing to a stack of papers that Liam recognized as assessments from his old school in Sydney. Your mathematical intuition is remarkable, especially in areas of topology and abstract. Algebra. Liam shifted uncomfortably. Those just make sense to me, which is precisely why we wanted to speak with you before the general meeting, Principal Simmons said. Professor Chen has proposed something rather unique for your case. Professor Chen adjusted his glasses. Wentworth will be partnering with the University of Melbourne for this initiative. Students will have access to university resources, including online courses, laboratory facilities, and mentorship from faculty members. In your case, Professor Harrington added, Professor Chen has suggested a dual enrollment of sorts. You would take 2 university-level mathematics courses online while maintaining your regular Wentworth schedule. Liam's eyes widened. University courses? But I'm only 12. Age is irrelevant in mathematics, Professor Chen said simply. Understanding is what matters. Victoria stepped forward. We've discussed this thoroughly, Liam. The courses would be challenging but manageable with your abilities. Most importantly, you'd still have your normal school experience. Friends, activities, everything we moved to Melbourne to provide. It's the balance we've been seeking, Robert added. Intellectual stimulation without social isolation. Liam looked around at the adults, all watching him expectantly. What about the other students in the program? Won't this single me out again? Principal Simmons smiled. Every student in the initiative will have a personalized learning plan. Zach Thompson will be doing advanced chemistry work with university labs. Maya Patel will study with the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. You won't be the only one with special arrangements. We're calling it Pathways, Professor Harrington explained, each student following their own path while remaining part of the Wentworth community. Liam considered this, the knot of anxiety in his chest loosening. I'd still be in your maths class. Professor Harrington nodded. With some modifications. You'd assist with peer teaching, explaining concepts to classmates who are struggling. Teaching others is one of the best ways to solidify understanding. And deepen empathy, Professor Chen added, something many gifted students need to develop alongside their intellectual abilities. The idea appealed to Liam, using his knowledge to help others rather than hiding it or showing off. It felt right somehow. Okay, he said finally, I'd like to try. The relief on his parents' faces was palpable. Victoria squeezed his shoulder. This is what we've hoped for all along, love. A place where you can be fully yourself. As other students began to arrive for the main meeting, Liam took a seat between Charlie and Amelia. The conference room gradually filled with an eclectic mix of students from years 7 through 12, each clutching their invitation letters and eyeing one another curiously. Professor Chen opened the meeting with a simple statement. Welcome to a program designed not to label you as gifted, but to recognize that all gifts require nurturing to reach their potential. As he outlined the initiative's structure, Liam watched his fellow students' expressions shift, from uncertainty to interest to excitement. Maya Patel, a slender Year 9 with a violin case perpetually at her side, lit up at the mention of conservatory resources. Zach Thompson, lanky and serious, leaned forward at the description of university laboratory access. Sophie Jenkins actually bounced in her seat when digital media facilities were discussed. This isn't about being special, Professor Chen concluded. It's about becoming the best version of yourselves, about finding the path that allows your unique abilities to flourish. As the meeting progressed into breakout sessions based on interest areas, Liam found himself in a small group with Zach Thompson and 2 other students with mathematical inclinations. To his surprise, Professor Harrington facilitated their discussion with genuine enthusiasm, drawing out each student's particular interests and strengths. The beauty of mathematics, she told them, isn't just in finding answers, it's in discovering new questions to ask. Liam caught her eye and, for the first time, saw not an adversary but a fellow traveler on the road of mathematical discovery. Her challenging equation had been a test, yes, but also an invitation, one he was finally ready to accept. Absolutely not, Liam, it's completely wrong. Liam stared at the equation he'd written on the whiteboard in the Scholars' Initiative room, baffled by Professor Harrington's objection. For the past month, their working relationship had been transforming from antagonistic to almost collegial, but moments like this reminded him of the tension that still lingered beneath the surface. I've checked it 3 times, he insisted, tapping the marker against the final line of his proof. The approach is unconventional, but the result is correct. Professor Harrington folded her arms. The result may be correct, but the method undermines everything I've taught about proper mathematical procedure. There are standards, Liam, established approaches that exist for a reason. From the corner of the room, Professor Chen observed their exchange with barely concealed amusement. These afternoon sessions, Liam, Professor Harrington, and occasionally Professor Chen, had become a regular feature of the Wentworth Scholars Initiative. Today, they were working through problems from Liam's university topology course, an area where his intuitive approach frequently clashed with Professor Harrington's methodical rigor. Perhaps, Professor Chen suggested mildly, both approaches have merit? Professor Harrington huffed. James, you're not helping. The boy needs structure, not encouragement to ignore established mathematical conventions. The boy, Liam muttered, is standing right here. A smile flickered across Professor Chen's face. Eleanor, do you recall our own university days? Professor Whitaker used to say that mathematics is not just about reaching the destination, but about creating new paths to get there. Whitaker was an eccentric, Professor Harrington replied, but her tone had softened. She turned back to Liam. Your intuition is remarkable, but intuition alone won't sustain you through advanced mathematics. You need rigor, precision, systematic thinking. Liam erased part of his work and began again, trying to frame his approach in more conventional terms. This was the delicate balance he'd been learning to navigate, honoring his natural mathematical instincts while developing the disciplined foundation Professor Harrington insisted was crucial. The door opened and Charlie poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt the maths festival, but we've got that group project meeting in 5 minutes, Liam." Professor Harrington checked her watch. "We'll continue this tomorrow. Liam, I want you to rework the proof with proper notation and submit it before our next session." As Liam packed his books, Professor Chen approached. "Your approach was actually quite elegant," he said quietly. "Professor Harrington pushes because she cares, but don't lose that intuitive spark. It's rarer than technical proficiency." Outside in the corridor, Charlie fell into step beside him, still battling the dragon lady. "She's not that bad," Liam said, surprising himself with the defense. "She's actually brilliant, just traditional." "If you say so. Ready to face the group presentation dilemma?" The dilemma was a humanities project on Australian immigration history that had brought together an unlikely team: Liam, Charlie, Amelia, and Sophie Jenkins. While the Scholars Initiative focused on individual talents, Principal Simmons had insisted that participants also engage in collaborative work to develop teamwork skills. They found Amelia and Sophie already set up in the library's group study room, a spread of books and laptop computers on the table before them. "You're late," Amelia noted without looking up from her notes. "By 2 minutes," Charlie protested, dropping into a chair. The maths geniuses were having a showdown. Sophie glanced up from her laptop. "Another Harrington-Mitchell face-off? I should have brought my camera." "It wasn't like that," Liam insisted, taking the seat beside her. "We were discussing alternate approaches to a topology problem." "Riveting," Sophie said dryly, but her smile took the sting from the words. In the weeks since the equation incident, Sophie had become an unexpected ally. Her video, though officially confiscated, had circulated widely enough to make Liam briefly infamous, but her subsequent friendship had helped normalize his position at Wentworth. "Let's focus," Amelia suggested, tapping her pen against her notebook. "We have 3 weeks until the presentation, and we need to decide on our approach." For the next hour, they debated the structure of their project. Charlie argued for a visual-heavy presentation with minimal text. Sophie advocated for a documentary-style video. Amelia pushed for a data-driven analysis. Liam, caught between their competing visions, tried to find common ground. "What if we combined approaches?" he suggested finally. Charlie's visuals, Sophie's video format, and Amelia's data could work together rather than compete. The others considered this, exchanging glances. "It could work," Sophie admitted. "I could film Charlie creating visual representations of Amelia's data points, showing the process as well as the final product. And Liam could develop an interactive component," Charlie added, warming to the idea. "Something that lets the audience manipulate variables and see how immigration patterns would change." Amelia nodded slowly. "A multidisciplinary approach would align with the Scholars Initiative philosophy, each of us contributing our strengths." As they began sketching out this integrated approach, Liam felt a familiar mathematical satisfaction, the pleasure of finding an elegant solution that incorporated seemingly disparate elements. Human relationships, he was discovering, sometimes followed patterns as complex and beautiful as mathematical systems. When the library announced closing time, they packed up with a sense of accomplishment. Their project had direction now, a clear path forward that honored each of their abilities. "Dinner at Nguyen's?" Charlie suggested as they exited the building into the cool evening air. "My treat. Well, my dad's treat. He gave me extra cash since I'm applying myself academically these days." The Vietnamese restaurant had become their regular haunt, a place where Scholars Initiative participants could relax together outside the pressures of school. As they claimed their usual corner table, Liam noticed Maya Patel and Zach Thompson already seated nearby, deep in conversation. "The prodigies are multiplying," Sophie teased, following his gaze. "Soon we'll take over the whole restaurant." "Is that what we are?" Liam asked quietly. "Prodigies?" Amelia considered the question as she studied the menu. "I think we're just people with particular strengths. The program is helping us develop those strengths instead of hiding them or being defined by them." Speaking of strengths, Charlie said, have you decided about the maths competition, Liam? Professor Harrington mentioned it again today. Liam hesitated. The Australian mathematics competition was a prestigious national event, and Professor Harrington had been urging him to enter the upper division despite his age. The prospect was both exciting and terrifying, a very public declaration of his abilities after years of hiding them. I'm still thinking about it, he said. Part of me wants to try, but another part is afraid of standing out. Sophie finished for him. After spending so long trying to blend in, Liam nodded, surprised by her perception. For what it's worth, she said, setting down her menu. Hiding didn't make you happy, and from what I've seen in the past month, being yourself hasn't made you any less likable. She's right, Charlie agreed. Plus, you'd probably win, and then I could say my best mate is a national maths champion. Major cool points by association. Their easy acceptance warmed something in Liam's chest. These friendships, genuine connections based on who he really was, not who he pretended to be, were the most unexpected and precious outcome of the equation challenge. I'll think about it, he promised, and for the first time, he truly meant it. The Melbourne Convention Centre hummed with nervous energy as hundreds of students from across Australia gathered for the National Mathematics Competition finals. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating rows of tables where competitors sat hunched over papers, pencils moving in frantic patterns. Liam Mitchell sat at table 42, his expression calm despite the butterflies in his stomach. After weeks of deliberation and encouragement from friends and mentors, he had decided to enter the competition. Now, surrounded by Australia's mathematical elite, most several years his senior, he faced the most challenging set of problems he'd ever encountered. In the spectator section, Victoria and Robert Mitchell sat with Professor Harrington and Professor Chen watching Liam work. Behind them, Charlie, Amelia and Sophie had claimed seats, having insisted on coming to support their friend despite the early Saturday morning start. He seems so composed, Victoria whispered, noting her son's methodical approach. Last night he was so nervous he could barely eat dinner. Professor Harrington nodded approvingly. He's pacing himself. Many competitors rush through the first problems and make careless errors. Liam understands that precision matters as much as speed. On the competition floor, Liam reached the final problem, a complex scenario involving non-Euclidean geometry that had most competitors scratching their heads in confusion. He studied it carefully, turning the problem over in his mind before setting pencil to paper. This was where Professor Harrington's insistence on rigorous methodology met his natural intuition, creating an approach that was both creative and precise. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the competition period, Liam set down his pencil with a quiet sigh of relief. He'd completed all 12 problems, though the last one had pushed the limits of his understanding. Around him, other competitors were comparing notes, some looking confident, others dejected. Mitchell, right? The boy at the next table leaned over as they handed in their papers. He was older, perhaps 15 or 16, with a Melbourne grammar school blazer. That last problem was brutal. What did you get for the final value? 4p minus the square root of 7, Liam replied. The boy's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? How'd you get there? I couldn't see past the initial transformation. Before Liam could explain, they were ushered out of the competition area to make way for the judges. In the atrium, his family and friends surrounded him, faces eager for details. How was it? Robert asked, handing his son a bottle of water. Challenging, Liam admitted, but good. I think I managed all 12, though, that last one. You finished all 12 problems? Professor Harrington interrupted, her expression a mixture of surprise and pride. Many university students don't complete the entire set. Charlie clapped him on the shoulder. See? National Maths Champion material, just like I said. They haven't announced results yet, Liam reminded him, though he couldn't help smiling at his friend's confidence. The judging process would take several hours, with results announced that afternoon. The group decided to get lunch at a nearby cafe, where Liam found himself describing the problems to his attentive audience. Professor Chen and Professor Harrington nodded appreciatively at his explanations, occasionally interjecting with questions that pushed him to clarify his thinking. Whether you win or not, Professor Chen said, as they finished their meal, the experience of competing at this level is invaluable. You're learning to trust your abilities in high-pressure situations. And you're meeting peers who share your passion, Professor Harrington added, gesturing to the cafe where several other competitors sat in animated mathematical discussion, connections that could last throughout your academic career. As they returned to the convention center for the award ceremony, Liam felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find the boy from Melbourne Grammar. Josh Kendrick, the boy, introduced himself. You're the one from that viral video, aren't you? The Year 7 who solved Professor Harrington's university-level equation? Liam nodded hesitantly, still uncomfortable with his minor fame. That was epic, Josh said with genuine admiration. I'm in Year 11 and I probably couldn't have solved that under pressure. He glanced at Professor Harrington, who was deep in conversation, with Professor Chen several meters away. Is she as terrifying as she seemed in the video? She's demanding, Liam replied diplomatically, but she's actually been amazing since then. She helped create a whole new program at our school. Josh looked impressed. Cool. Hey, a bunch of us are starting an online problem-solving group for competitions like this. We meet virtually twice a month to work through challenging problems together. Would you be interested? The invitation caught Liam by surprise. 6 months ago, he'd been deliberately hiding his abilities, afraid of standing out. Now, he was being invited to join a community that celebrated the very talent he'd tried to conceal. I'd like that, he said, and meant it. The award ceremony began with recognition of regional winners, before moving to the national finalists. Liam's category, Junior Division, was announced third, with competitors through Year 9 eligible, despite most being in Years 8 and 9. Third place in the Junior Division, the announcer read, from Brisbane Grammar School, Emily Chen. Applause filled the auditorium as a beaming girl took the stage. Second place in the Junior Division, from Melbourne Grammar School, Joshua Kendrick. Josh gave Liam a surprised thumbs up as he made his way to the stage. And first place in the Junior Division, with a perfect score on all 12 problems, something we've only seen twice before in the competition's history. From Wentworth Secondary College in Melbourne, Liam Mitchell. The auditorium erupted in applause. Liam sat frozen until Charlie gave him a gentle push. That's you, mate. Go get your trophy. As he walked toward the stage, Liam caught glimpses of his parents' proud faces, of Professor Harrington's approving nod, of his friends cheering enthusiastically. This moment of recognition, public, undeniable, impossible to hide from, was everything he'd once feared. Yet as he accepted the crystal trophy and certificate, he felt not exposed, but affirmed. This was who he was, one facet of his identity now comfortably integrated with the others. The post-ceremony reception buzzed with conversation as competitors and families mingled over refreshments. Liam found himself at the center of a small group of fellow mathematics enthusiasts, discussing approaches to the most challenging problems. To his surprise, he was as interested in their methods as they were in his. "You've found your tribe," Professor Chen observed, appearing at his elbow with a cup of punch. "How does it feel?" Liam considered the question. "Good," he said finally, "but different than I expected. It's not about being special or standing out. It's about connecting over something we all love." Professor Chen smiled. "That's the secret most gifted students take. Years to discover. Excellence isn't about separation from others. It's about finding where you belong." As they prepared to leave, Professor Harrington approached Liam with an uncharacteristically warm smile. "Congratulations. Your solution to the final problem was particularly elegant." Coming from her, the praise carried special weight. "Thank you. I use the structural approach you've been drilling into me, but with the intuitive leap Professor Chen encourages. A perfect synthesis," she agreed. "Perhaps there's something to this balance we've been working toward after all." Outside the convention center, as Melbourne's winter sunlight bathed the city in golden light, Liam looked around at the unlikely community that had formed around him. Family, teachers, friends, and now fellow competitors. For years he'd believed that his mathematical ability would isolate him, forcing a choice between intellectual fulfillment and belonging. Today had proven that dichotomy false. He belonged, not despite his abilities, but with them fully expressed as part of who he was. The relationship between immigration policy and economic outcomes demonstrates a clear correlation, as shown in Figure 3, Liam explained, gesturing to the interactive graph projected on the classroom wall. With a tap on his tablet, the visualization shifted, data points rearranging themselves to illustrate changing patterns. However, correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation. Human stories lie behind each of these data points. On cue, the projection transitioned to Sophie's documentary segment, a series of powerful interviews with immigrants who had arrived in Australia during different policy eras. As the video played, Charlie's artistic visualizations faded in, transforming abstract statistics into human experiences rendered in vivid colors and thoughtful compositions. Their humanities presentation on Australian immigration history had evolved into something far beyond a standard school project. For 6 weeks, the team had worked to create a multidisciplinary exploration that combined Amelia's meticulous research, Sophie's filmmaking, Charlie's visual art, and Liam's mathematical modeling. From the back of the classroom, Principal Simmons watched with evident satisfaction. The integration of different approaches and talents exemplified exactly what the Wentworth Scholars Initiative had been designed to foster. Beside her, their humanities teacher, Mr. Patel, Amelia's uncle, though he never acknowledged the relationship in class, nodded approvingly as the presentation unfolded. When the final segment concluded, a moving reflection on Australia's future as a multicultural nation, the classroom erupted in applause. Even students who typically dozed through presentations were engaged, some jotting notes for their own upcoming projects. "Exceptional work," Mr. Patel commented as the team took questions from their classmates. "You've demonstrated how multiple perspectives can illuminate a complex topic far more effectively than any single approach." After class, Principal Simmons stopped them in the corridor. "That was precisely the kind of cross-disciplinary thinking we hoped the Scholars Initiative would encourage," she told them. "Would you consider presenting at the Education Innovation Conference next month? The Department of Education is looking for examples of student-led collaborative learning." The four exchanged surprised glances. "A real conference?" Charlie asked. "With actual education experts and stuff?" "Precisely," Principal Simmons confirmed. "Your project exemplifies the integration of multiple intelligences and learning styles, something many schools struggle to achieve." As they discussed logistics, Liam felt a familiar sense of wonder at how dramatically his school experience had transformed. 6 months ago, he'd been deliberately underperforming, afraid of standing out. Now he was being invited to showcase his work at a professional conference. The change wasn't just in external recognition, but in his internal comfort with his own abilities. Later that afternoon, in the now familiar setting of the Scholars Initiative room, Liam worked through a problem set for his university course while half listening to Maya Patel practice a particularly challenging violin passage. The space had evolved into a collaborative work environment where participants could pursue individual projects while drawing inspiration from each other's diverse talents. "That sounded much better," Professor Chen commented as Maya completed the passage. "You've resolved the fingering issue." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Zach suggested thinking of it as a wave function rather than a melodic line. Somehow the mathematical perspective helped. Liam smiled to himself. These cross-pollinations of ideas had become a hallmark of the program. Musicians adopting mathematical concepts, artists applying scientific principles, mathematicians finding inspiration in literary patterns. The boundaries between disciplines grew increasingly permeable as students discovered unexpected connections. Professor Harrington entered, carrying a stack of journals. "Liam, I've brought those topology papers we discussed, and there's something else we should talk about." She set the journals on the table beside him. "The University of Melbourne's Mathematics Department is hosting a summer symposium on emerging approaches in topology. Professor Chen and I think you should present your work on non-Euclidean manifolds." Liam looked up, startled. "Present? To university mathematicians? Your approach is genuinely novel," Professor Chen said, joining the conversation. "The extension of your competition solution has implications for several open problems in the field." Professor Harrington nodded agreement. "It's unconventional, certainly, but that's precisely what makes it valuable. You're approaching these problems without the constraints that limit more traditionally trained mathematicians." Liam considered the proposal. A year ago, the idea would have terrified him. Standing before experts, exposing his thinking to potential criticism. Now he found himself intrigued rather than intimidated. "I'd need help structuring the presentation," he said. making sure my notation is consistent with standard practices. That's where I come in, Professor Harrington said with a small smile. Your intuition combined with my rigorous approach, the synthesis you demonstrated in the competition. A mathematical yin and yang, Professor Chen observed with amusement. As they discussed the symposium, Liam reflected on how his relationship with Professor Harrington had evolved. What had begun as antagonism had transformed into a productive partnership, a structural discipline complementing his intuitive leaps. They still disagreed regularly, sometimes heatedly, but the tension had become creative rather than destructive. That evening, as Liam explained the symposium invitation to his parents over dinner, he realized how naturally he now discussed his mathematical work. Gone was the self-consciousness, the fear of seeming different. His ability was simply one aspect of who he was, like Charlie's artistic talent, or Sophie's filmmaking, or Amelia's analytical mind. "I'm so proud of you," Victoria said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "Not just for the mathematics, but for how you found your balance." Robert nodded agreement. "When we moved to Melbourne, we hoped you'd find a place where you could be yourself, all of yourself. It seems you have." "It wasn't what I expected," Liam admitted. "I thought I had to choose between being smart and being normal. But it turns out normal includes all sorts of different abilities. Everyone at Wentworth has something they're especially good at. Mine just happens to be maths." Later that night, as he worked through problems for his university course, Liam's phone buzzed with a message from Charlie. "Emergency pizza meeting at Russo's, 20 minutes. Bring brain." Curious, Liam made his way to the local pizzeria, where he found not just Charlie, but Amelia, Sophie, Zach, Maya, and Josh Kendrick from Melbourne Grammar, huddled around the restaurant's largest table. "What's the emergency?" Liam asked, sliding into an empty chair. "This," Charlie said dramatically, pushing a flyer across the table. "International Youth Science and Arts Festival. Teams of 6 from schools across the Pacific Rim competing in Singapore next year." Liam scanned the details. The competition involved collaborative projects combining scientific innovation with artistic communication. Teams would develop solutions to real-world problems and present them through multiple media. "We'd be perfect for this," Sophie said, excitement evident in her voice. "Our immigration project was basically a trial run for exactly this kind of multidisciplinary approach." "But we need 6 team members," Amelia pointed out, "and specific discipline coverage." Charlie grinned. "Hence our dream team. Liam for mathematics, Zach for science, Maya for music, Sophie for digital media, Amelia for research and analysis, and me for visual arts." "Cross-school teams are allowed?" Liam asked, noting Josh's presence. "I'm not part of the team," Josh explained, "but my sister competed last year. I'm here as your inside source on how the competition actually works." As the pizza arrived and Josh shared insights about the festival, Liam felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just about showcasing individual talents, but about integration, finding ways for different abilities to complement and amplify each other. It was the philosophy of the Scholars Initiative expanded to an international stage. "What do you think, Liam?" Charlie asked. "Are you in?" Looking around at these friends who had helped him find balance between his exceptional abilities and his need for normal teenage experiences, Liam didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Let's do this." The restaurant seemed to brighten with their collective enthusiasm as they began brainstorming potential projects, each contributing ideas from their unique perspective. In that moment of creative collaboration, Liam recognized how far he'd come from the boy who'd once hidden his light, afraid of standing out. He had found his place, not separate from others because of his abilities, but connected to them through the unique contribution he could make. It wasn't about solving an impossible equation for a teacher's salary. It was about solving the much more complex equation of human potential, finding the variables that allowed each person to flourish as their authentic self. Singapore's Changi Exhibition Centre sparkled under the tropical sun, flags from 26 nations fluttering in the gentle breeze. Inside the vast complex, the International Youth Science and Arts Festival had transformed the space into a showcase of young innovation. Interactive displays, artistic installations, and scientific demonstrations filled the exhibition halls where teams of students presented their visions for addressing global challenges. The Wentworth team stood beside their project space, making final adjustments before the judge's arrival. 6 months of preparation had culminated in this moment, representing Australia on an international stage with their integrated approach to sustainable urban water management. "Display calibrated," Sophie announced, adjusting the settings on the holographic projection that dominated the center of their space. The 3D visualization showed Melbourne's cityscape with a network of blue lines representing their proposed water reclamation system. "Music sequence synced," Maya confirmed, testing the audio component that translated water usage patterns into a haunting melodic representation. The sound design served both aesthetic and functional purposes, making data patterns perceivable through multiple senses. Zach carefully checked the working model that demonstrated their filtration system in miniature. "Engineering prototype operational, though I still think we should have included the algae component." "The judges will focus on integration, not just technical innovation," Amelia reminded him, adjusting her blazer nervously. "Our strength is how the pieces work together." Charlie stepped back from the artistic panels that framed their display, a series of mixed media pieces that traced water's journey through urban environments. "Art installation complete. Just don't touch the bottom right corner, paint's still tacky." Liam was quiet, reviewing the mathematical models that underpinned their entire project. His contribution had been developing algorithms that optimized water flow through the proposed system, balancing efficiency with accessibility across different urban environments. "1 minute to judging," Professor Harrington announced, approaching with Professor Chen. Both teachers had accompanied the team to Singapore as faculty advisors, their own initial skepticism about cross-disciplinary learning thoroughly dispelled by the students' achievement. "Remember," Professor Chen told them, "you've already succeeded by creating something truly integrated. The judging is secondary to what you've learned in the process." Professor Harrington's advice was more pragmatic. "Speak clearly, maintain eye contact, and let your passion show. You know this project better than anyone." As the judges, a distinguished panel of scientists, artists, educators, and industry leaders, approached their station, Liam felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. Then he caught sight of his parents in the visitors' area, their encouraging smiles steadying him. Victoria and Robert Mitchell had rearranged research commitments and client meetings to be here, understanding how significant this moment was in their son's journey. "Good morning," the lead judge greeted them. "Please introduce yourselves and your project." With practiced coordination, the team launched into their presentation. Sophie began with the overview, her filmmaker's instinct for narrative drawing the judges into the problem of urban water management. Zach followed with the technical specifications, explaining how their system could be implemented. Using existing infrastructure, Maya demonstrated how the audio component could help maintenance workers identify system irregularities, while Charlie explained how the artistic elements would engage community participation. "The entire system," Amelia concluded, "is designed to be adaptable to different urban environments from Melbourne to Mumbai." "And the mathematical backbone?" asked a judge, who had been identified as Dr. Takahashi, a leading hydrological engineer. Liam stepped forward, activating the simulation on his tablet. "Our optimization algorithm balances 4 critical variables," he explained, guiding the judges through the mathematical model with a confidence that would have astonished his earlier self. "What makes this approach unique is its adaptability to irregular urban development patterns." Dr. Takahashi asked several penetrating questions about the model's assumptions and limitations. 2 years ago, such interrogation might have flustered Liam. Now he engaged with the questions thoughtfully, acknowledging limitations while defending the model's core strengths. "Most impressive," Dr. Takahashi said finally, "especially for a student your age." "Age is irrelevant in mathematics," Liam replied with a small smile, echoing Professor Chen's words from long ago. "Understanding is what matters." Throughout the day, the team presented to multiple judging panels and answered questions from other competitors and visitors. By evening, exhausted but exhilarated, they gathered with the Australian delegation for the preliminary results announcement. "Regardless of the outcome," Zach said as they waited, "we've proven that integrated approaches work. No single discipline could have addressed all aspects of the problem." "That's the real victory," Maya agreed, "finding how different talents can complement each other." When the announcement came that the Wentworth team had advanced to the final round, their celebration was as much for the validation of their approach as for the competitive achievement. They had 2 more days of rigorous evaluation ahead, but already they had demonstrated the power of their collaborative model. Later that evening, as the team relaxed in the hotel lobby, Principal Simmons joined them with unexpected news. "The Victorian Department of Education has been following your progress," she told them. "They're interested in using the Wentworth Scholars Initiative as a model for a statewide program. They want to film a documentary about your experience here in Singapore and back at school." The team exchanged surprised glances. "They want to film us?" Charlie asked, running a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair. "Like, as examples?" "As pioneers," Principal Simmons corrected. "What?" "Began as a solution for one student, has evolved into something that could transform how we nurture diverse talents across the educational system." Liam sat quietly, processing this development. The equation challenge that had once exposed his hidden abilities had initiated a cascade of changes extending far beyond his personal journey. What Professor Harrington had intended as a moment of confrontation had instead become a catalyst for systemic transformation. "From her salary to a statewide educational initiative," he murmured half to himself. "That's quite a return on investment." Professor Harrington, who had overheard as she approached, actually laughed. "Indeed, though I never did have to surrender my salary, did I?" "I'd say you invested it more wisely," Liam replied with a smile. As conversation flowed around him, Liam found himself reflecting on the extraordinary path that had led from that tense classroom moment to this international stage. He had feared that his mathematical ability would isolate him, forcing him to choose between intellectual fulfillment and belonging. Instead, it had become the first thread in a tapestry of connections, to mentors who challenged him, to friends who accepted him, and to a purpose larger than himself. The equation that had once seemed impossible to solve in front of his peers had ultimately yielded the most elegant solution of all, the discovery that true potential is realized not in isolation, but in connection. 2 years after the equation challenge, Wentworth Secondary College had transformed. What had begun as a small initiative for 15 students had expanded into a comprehensive program serving over 100 participants across Melbourne's school district. The original Scholars Initiative Room had grown into a dedicated wing, with specialized spaces for everything from digital media production to engineering prototypes to musical composition. On this particular morning, Liam Mitchell stood before a group of wide-eyed Year 5 students visiting from local primary schools. At 14, he had grown taller, his voice occasionally cracking with adolescent changes, but his blue eyes still held the same thoughtful intensity. "Mathematics isn't just about finding answers," he explained, guiding the children through an interactive display of geometric puzzles. "It's about discovering patterns, asking questions and seeing connections that others might miss." From the back of the room, Professor Harrington watched with quiet satisfaction. The Wentworth Mentorship Program, where Scholars Initiative participants shared their knowledge with younger students, had been her suggestion, designed to develop communication skills alongside academic abilities. Seeing Liam expertly balancing conceptual depth with age-appropriate explanations confirmed the wisdom of that approach. "He's become quite the teacher," Principal Simmons observed, joining her. "Hard to believe this is the same boy who once hid his abilities." "He's found his equilibrium," Professor Harrington agreed. "The balance we've all been seeking." After the primary students departed, Liam joined the regular meeting of the advanced mathematics group. Now in Year 9, he split his time between standard classes, university-level coursework, and collaborative projects. The dual enrollment experiment had proven so successful that 15 other Wentworth students now took university courses in their areas of exceptional ability, from Mayer's music theory to Zach's organic chemistry. "I've been considering the implications of our Singapore project," Liam told the group as they reviewed recent work. "The water management algorithm has applications beyond urban planning. I think we could adapt it for agricultural water distribution in drought-prone regions." "Another cross-disciplinary project?" Professor Chen asked with interest. Liam nodded. "The mathematics is just one component. We'd need environmental science, agricultural expertise, economic modeling and community engagement strategies, and artistic elements for effective communication," added Charlie, who had joined the meeting to discuss visual representations of mathematical concepts. Though not mathematically inclined himself, He had become an essential collaborator, translating abstract ideas into visual forms that made them accessible to broader audiences. The discussion flowed naturally between pure theory and practical applications, between individual insights and collaborative possibilities. This integration of diverse perspectives had become the hallmark of the Wentworth approach, a model now being studied by educational institutions across Australia and beyond. After school, Liam met his parents at the university cafe where they often gathered when schedules aligned. Victoria and Robert had adjusted their professional commitments to be more present during these formative years, recognizing the importance of family support alongside academic development. "How was the primary school presentation?" Victoria asked, sliding a hot chocolate toward her son. "Good," Liam replied. "They asked better questions than some university students I've met. Kids are naturally curious when they're not afraid of being wrong." Robert smiled at the observation. "Speaking of universities, we received a letter from Melbourne today. They're offering you early admission to their advanced mathematics program after you complete Year 10. Liam absorbed this news with surprising calm. 2 years ago, such an offer would have seemed the ultimate validation, proof of his exceptional abilities. Now it was simply one option among many to consider. "I'd like to finish at Wentworth," he said, after a moment's reflection. "The university courses are challenging enough for now, and I'm learning things at school that go beyond academics." Victoria nodded, understanding his choice. "The integration that's been so central to the Scholars Initiative." "Exactly. University will be focused on specialized knowledge. Right now I'm more interested in connections between different fields and people." As if to illustrate his point, Charlie and Amelia appeared at the cafe entrance, waving enthusiastically. Behind them came Sophie, her filmmaker's eye evident in the professional camera slung over her shoulder. They had come from filming the latest episode of Scholars' Perspectives, the documentary series that had grown from the Department of Education's initial interest. What had begun as a simple documentation of the Singapore competition had evolved into an ongoing exploration of integrated learning approaches. "We just interviewed Professor Harrington," Sophie announced as they joined the Mitchell family. "She actually smiled on camera. Twice." "Historical footage," Charlie quipped. "Future generations won't believe it." Amelia rolled her eyes at their teasing. She was discussing the expansion of the initiative to rural schools. The distance learning component launches next term. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed the project's progress. 2 years of friendship had created a comfortable dynamic among them, each recognizing and respecting the other's strengths. They had their disagreements and tensions, certainly, especially during high-pressure projects, but the foundation remained solid. Later that evening, as Liam worked through university assignments in his room, a notification appeared on his tablet. Professor Harrington had sent an article, a profile of Dr. Eleanor Harrington, in the Australian Journal of Educational Innovation. The piece detailed her journey from traditional mathematics instruction to pioneering integrated learning approaches. One quote caught Liam's attention. "My greatest lesson came from a student who showed me that teaching isn't about enforcing conformity to established methods, but about recognizing and nurturing diverse paths to understanding. What began as a challenge became a collaboration that transformed both our approaches." Liam smiled at the diplomatic description of their confrontational beginning. Professor Harrington hadn't mentioned the equation challenge or the salary wager specifically, but the reference was clear to anyone who knew their history. He typed a quick response. "Congratulations on the recognition. You've transformed education for many students beyond just me." Her reply came moments later. "We transformed it together. Every equation has multiple variables, and in this case, each was essential to the solution." The mathematical metaphor was fitting. What had begun as an antagonistic relationship had evolved into a productive partnership based on mutual respect, her rigor complementing his intuition, his creativity challenging her traditionalism. Neither approach alone would have been sufficient. Together, they had created something greater than the sum of its parts. As Liam returned to his studies, he reflected on the extraordinary journey from that tense classroom moment to the thriving educational community that had grown around it. The equation that had seemed impossible at first glance had yielded an elegant solution that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Professor Harrington had never surrendered her salary, but what she and Liam had created together was worth far more, a model for nurturing exceptional abilities without sacrificing connection, for celebrating differences while finding common ground, for solving the complex equation of human potential, one variable at a time. In the quiet of his room, surrounded by books and notes and the evidence of a mind free to explore without constraints, Liam Mitchell understood that the most valuable lesson hadn't been mathematical at all. It had been learning that true brilliance doesn't separate us from others. It creates new pathways for connection, new possibilities for understanding, and new ways of seeing the world. Not in isolation, but in relationship. That was the solution no one could have predicted. That was the answer worth more than any salary.